I think Thornton failed to deliver the improvement in student performance that its authors envisioned because no one was helping. Thornton envisioned increases in funding totaling about 80% in state funding for schools, about $1.1 billion, and promised that it would be adjusted for inflation. From 2000 to 2008, there was an actual increase of $2.3 billion. After 2008, the inflation increases came to an end, but but between 2008 and 2016, there was still another increase of $950 million. So there was a total increase following Thornton of $3.2 billion over that period. That was a 113% increase in state aid for education. It's a lot of money. Thornton also required that the MSDE withhold funds from districts that were not implementing Thornton recommendations, but it never did that. So formulas used to distribute the funds, but the school boards were free to use that money as they wished, as had always been the case before. The result was only a very modest improvement in student performance. From 2003 through 2017, there was a very modest improvement on NAEP. But despite the investment from Thornton, the improvement in Maryland was no greater than in the nation as a whole. And Maryland still wound up exactly where it began, in the middle of the pack, which is where it began. Maryland now ends up with one of the most expensive state systems in the United States, but only average student performance. The State Department of Education was not held accountable by the legislature for its failure to hold districts accountable for their performance. So it's no surprise that an independent evaluator found that the districts had not implemented proven reforms on which the Thornton recommendations were premised. More money was spent, but essentially it was spent on what had already been going on. I am not pointing fingers. What I have just described is, I think, the natural result of a very long tradition of the state aiding schools in the conviction that decisions about how to spend the money the state provides in aid are best made at the local level. In that respect, Maryland is no different from almost all other states in the United States. But I conclude that Kirwan will fail if the same mistakes are made again. You will get exactly what you got. So let's go back to the premises of the Kirwan Commission work. The Commission was tasked in the first instance with revising school funding formulas and making recommendations to bring Maryland up to global performance standards. That, in essence, was the charge. The Commission then studied the strategies used by the top performers to get to the top with superior achievement and, point just made, much greater equity. That is, they not only are performing at much higher levels, but the distance between the top 10th and the bottom 10th of kids is much shorter in those countries than it is here. Something, as Jason said, no state in the United States has yet been able to do. The Commission understands that this cannot be done unless major changes are made in the system to implement the benchmarked strategies. And it also understands, and this is key, that the data show that once a country or a state invests $50,000 in students over their entire time in school, above that, how the money is spent is more important than how much is spent. So what do we conclude? I conclude two things from this. First, it's essential that beyond a certain funding floor, money should go to districts and schools only if that district and that school is implementing the strategies that the top performing countries have used to create their high-performing systems. But let me make it clear here, by the way, that this is not to say they should be implementing the interventions. It is to say that they need a system that is designed on the same principles as the top-performing systems are designed. And if they're not doing that, they should not get the additional money. Because in effect, what the Commission spent a year doing was discovering that there are a set of principles that underlie the design of the high-performing systems, and those principles are nearly universal. They're the same in Asia as they are in Europe, the same in Australia as they are in Canada. And you don't find them here. So that's number one. Two, I conclude that the state will need to have a small oversight unit with budget and regulatory power holding the state agencies responsible for implementation accountable for their performance during the implementation period, after which it should be abolished, which is to say I'm exactly where former Superintendent Grasmick is. If you are going to get the fundamental changes in the design of the whole system, and here I'm speaking not just of the part for which the State Department of Education is responsible, but the entire system, you will need to have, as she said, a small group of people who are dedicated to nothing but and have the authority to make it happen in collaboration with the state agencies that are entrusted with the implementation. Let me go to another point here. I think, I sense that around the table there's a good deal of agreement that test-based teacher accountability of the kind that has dominated the discussion of accountability in the United States since the year 2000, in which No Child Left Behind was introduced in the United States Senate, has produced absolutely toxic results. It is largely responsible for the situation that was described earlier, in which applications to schools of education are plummeting, very good teachers are leaving, and we have a profession that nobody wants to get into. That cannot continue without the implosion of the American school system. The fundamental drift of what the Commission has done over this last year and a half, it seems to me, has come to agreement that what is needed to reverse that is what the top performers have dedicated themselves to, which is attracting many of the best and brightest kids in our high school into the profession, paying them the way they need to be paid, creating professional conditions of work for them, making it possible for them to do their best work, giving them incentives that are very like those in professional service firms for people to get better and better and better at the work for every day they are on the job, for as many years as they are on the job, and give them the support they then need to get the job done. It's not a complicated formula, but it's utterly different from what we have been mostly doing in the United States, especially since test-based teacher accountability was first introduced. The Commission, it seems to me, has fundamentally adopted the perspective of the top-performing systems, building on a strong vision of teacher professionalism. If you look, as sociologists do, at the high-status professions, what you see is a recurring pattern, at least what I see is a recurring pattern, and it's really important. You do see that the people doing the work report to people who are higher in the hierarchy than they are, which is what you see in schools. But it's very different, because along with that, what you see is a much more important form of accountability among the people in that, whatever it is, law firm, medical practice, architectural firm, to each other. In a well-functioning law firm, everybody understands that if the legal researcher is not doing his or her job, everybody else's job is imperiled. If the person who goes out and gets new business is not doing his or her job, everybody else's job is imperiled. If the people who are good litigators fall down on the job, everybody else is in trouble too. They are highly interdependent. The whole drift of the Commission's work has been, in effect, not only to improve teachers' pay on this point, but to change the place in which they're working so that they work like the people in medical practices work, the people in architectural firms work, the people in accounting firms work, the people in law firms work. They work as a team. By the way, test-based accountability destroys what I just described, as David said earlier. It's antithetical to that idea. And yet, if you look what it actually means to be a high-status professional in this country or any other, what I just said is central to the idea of being a professional. The sociologists call this lateral accountability. It's accountability to your peers, with your peers. It was referred to earlier here as reciprocal accountability. It's the same idea. We're all accountable to each other. When you put that kind of accountability side by side with accountability to the people to whom you report, what you have is the most powerful form of accountability there is in any social organization. And that, it seems to me, is what the accountability is working its way towards. So I'm saying this because I think the conclusions that I at least have drawn, and I think many others around the table, that Kirwan will not succeed any better than its predecessor unless there is a strong oversight body making sure it does succeed, is not the only idea of accountability on the table. If you look at what the Commission has done, there are many pieces of accountability in it. But it seems to me this idea of mutual accountability, of people working together in the school toward a common end, totally dependent on each other. And by the way, it's a vision in which, because they work together all the time, they know how well each other are doing. They are in the best position to make a judgment, not the worst, about who's doing well and who isn't. And so having what you see in a really good professional service firm is that the workers are the owners and they're also the managers. You don't have this division between the people who do the work and people who make the decisions that you see in schools. Everybody's in it together. That form of accountability is very powerful. I believe that is really what the Commission is putting on the table. Thank you.
Thank you.